Welcome people coming in. We'll be starting very shortly. Just wait for some people to come through. So welcome guys. Thank you for joining me on this webinar today. This webinar is an introduction to GamCare, and I'll also be giving you a little insight into my own lived experience with gambling harm. I'll tell you a little bit about myself as we move forward. So this webinar is in collaboration with the Responsible Gaming Foundation. I'm led to believe that it is one of many webinars happening throughout the year as part of their Responsible Gaming initiative. So thank you all for joining it. And yeah, hopefully the next sort of hour or so, you'll learn a little bit about who I work for, GamCare, who I am and my experience. Yeah, a little bit about kind of responsible gaming and what we can all do to make it safer for people. What we'll do, appreciate that there's quite a few of you in the room. So what we'll do is I'll go through the slides. I'll talk to you about, what I'm going to talk about. And then at the end, I'll leave about 15, 20 minutes for questions. So if you do think of a question halfway through, jot it down on a bit of paper. And then, yeah, feel free to ask it at the end. You can either put them into the Q&A chat or you can ask them just by unmuting. Yes, raise your hand and we can unmute you. Great. Okay, cool. So, my name's Mat Bърджис. I work for an organization called GamCare. GamCare are the leading provider of information, advice, support and treatment for anyone experiencing harm in the UK. I'm sorry, my slides are going to move. Apologies. Anyone experiencing gambling harm in the UK. We, as an organization, engage with thousands of people every year. We run the National Gambling Helpline. Okay, so that is a helpline number for people to call if they're experiencing any type of harm from gambling. Also, we are not just there for the gambler. We are there to support anyone who's affected by someone else's gambling. We call these people affected others. So anyone that is experiencing some sort of difficulty in life because someone close to them is gambling, we can help support them too. So yeah, we're an independent charity with a leading provider of that information and advice. So yeah, we run the National Gambling Helpline. We have live chat, forum, chat rooms as well. Okay, so you don't just have to come through the helpline. We also have international work. Okay, so we are starting to look at the international landscape. Everything we do at the moment is in the UK. Sorry, apologies. There's something on my slides that's making them move. But we are now beginning this project to collaborate with organizations who want to develop similar services to ours. We want to collaborate and network and share as much as possible. So what I would say to you is if you are looking for support from GamCare on an international level, you've got Katie's email there, which I can give you at the end as well. And we are very much there to talk about gambling and gambling harm. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to stop this transition because it's very annoying. There we go. My apologies. Sorry about this, guys. I thought this would be all in order, but apparently not. Cool. Great. Sorry about that. So yeah, just going back to reiterate that international work, we're currently looking at how we can engage with international organizations. At the moment, we only work with people in the UK, but we want to do a little bit more. We know that obviously that gambling affects people worldwide. And Katie, who is our international project manager, is the person to collaborate with. So if there's something that you're thinking, actually, we'd like to collaborate with GamCare, absolutely use the email address at the bottom there, which is katie.budd@gamcare.org.uk. And Katie will be able to sort of have a conversation with you and maybe work out some ways that we can collaborate in the future. So obviously we know gambling affects many, many people around the world. In the UK, we have lots of people, as I say, that contact us through the helpline. Each story is individual, okay? And I think that's a really important thing to touch on. What you are about to hear is what happened to me, okay? And I will talk about it quite candidly and in some depth. I'm happy to answer questions about it at the end. I try to work on the basis that no question is too personal. Okay, you're more than welcome to ask those personal questions, because I believe that that is the way that we learn. Okay, we can learn a lot from experience. Okay, obviously today is about my gambling experience, but I can learn from people's experience of other things as well. And I believe that's the way we should be, you know, as a human race, we should be learning from each other. So I do want to be very, very clear at this before I start this story and just give a couple of trigger warnings. Okay, obviously this story includes details of gambling harm. Okay, so please be aware of that. It does also include details of suicidal ideation and attempt. Okay, so I just want you to be very aware of that before I start. I don't want to trigger anyone in the room. If that is something that you may not want to hear about, then I would suggest that for the next sort of 15-20 minutes that you sort of take the volume down on this one, because that we will be touching on it. So I am 30 years old, okay, but I started gambling when I was 15. In the UK, it's illegal to gamble when you're 15. Okay, at the time that I started gambling, you were able to do the national lottery at 16, and you were able to gamble on sports and casino games and all that kind of stuff at the age of 18. That law's actually changed now, and it's a flat 18 for everything, lottery included. But when I started gambling, yeah, I was 15. I was buying scratch cards illegally, and I was occasionally betting on football matches. Very, very small amounts of money, very small, couple of pounds here and there. But I like to highlight that I started gambling at 15 because I believe that is where the journey started. And I believe that there is, the age that I started gambling had an impact on what came next. Okay. So at 17, I went to university and I studied performing arts. So I studied theatre and, musical theatre and things like that. At that time, I was still gambling a little bit, now and again, a couple of scratch cards here and there. But I hadn't really ever played on machines or anything like that. So I joined my university football team, and very quickly we created a culture, I guess, of getting up in the morning on a Sunday. We'd go and play our football match. We'd come home from our football match, get showered, get changed. We'd go down to the local pub and we'd watch the Premier League football games that were happening that afternoon. Now, about 3 or 4 doors down from the bookmaker, from the pub, was a bookmaker. Okay, so in between games, we would run to the bookmakers and we'd place our football bets. This person to score first, that person to be sent off, or whatever it might be. At that point, I was probably spending maybe 10 to 20 pounds a weekend. Okay, £5 bet here and there. Pretty social gambling, fairly responsible gambling at this point. Wasn't costing me money that I couldn't afford, was enjoyable, and something to do in a social situation. It was about 5 or 6 weeks into doing that I went into the bookmakers one day, put my football bets on like I normally would, and a few of my friends sort of sloped off and went in and put some money into these machines that I'd never seen before. I now know that these machines were called, we call them FOBTs, fixed odds betting terminals. Okay, and they were playing games like virtual roulette. I'd never played roulette in my life. I'd never played on a machine in my life, really. And I watched one of my friends turn a small amount of money into a fairly large amount of money. And I thought, oh, that looks quite simple and quite quick. So I put £4 of my money into the machine. And within about 10 minutes, I turned that into about £35. And I was like, cool, this is that's more money than I'd made ever betting on football, put it that way. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. So as time went on, I decided that every Sunday when we do our usual drinking and watch the football and place bets, I'd put a little bit of money on the football, but I'd also get a little bit more money out and I'd play the machines. And over time, that machine play started to grow and grow. It was going into my second year of uni that I was finding that not only was I playing these machines more and more, I was actually, sorry, not only was I putting more money into them, I was playing them more and more, in the sense that it wasn't just a Sunday now. Sometimes I would leave university on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and I'd go into the bookmakers and I'd play the machines then. So at this point, I'm probably spending about £50 a week. So my initial spend on gambling when I first started had more than doubled. At that point, I don't think I ever thought it was a problem. I was probably gambling a little bit more than I should have been at the, for what I was earning as a student. You don't have a lot of access to funds. So I was probably gambling a little bit more than I probably should have. But I didn't think it was a problem. It was just something that I enjoyed, and something that occasionally would make me a bit of money. So I carried on into my second year, and the machine play got higher and higher. I was spending more and more time in the bookies, spending more and more money. I then discovered the live casino function of online gambling operators. So I basically discovered that I could play the roulette game that I was playing in the bookmakers on my laptop in my house. And I think this is a real point where I look back and go, that's where things started to go downhill. I would sit in my room for sometimes 2, 3, 4 hours. And by this point, I'm probably spending up to £200 a week. This is money that I really can't afford, if I'm totally honest. I wasn't earning at the time because I was at university. But I was continuously putting money into this game, and starting to, in my own mind, think this is becoming a little bit addictive. This is becoming something I'm doing a bit too much. And looking back, that's probably where I should have got some help, but I didn't. I kind of ignored that feeling. I guess my ego told me that I would never get fully addicted to something, that I was better than that. That I was able to control what was going on. So over the next that was my second year. So going into my third year, that gambling continued. I actually took out a part-time job whilst I was at university, which I didn't have before I was gambling, but I took it out to fund my gambling. I could have lived on what I was getting from my student loan if I wasn't gambling, but I was. So I had to go and earn more money. So I was going to university in the day. Of an evening, I was working in a pub for 3 or 4 hours, coming home. And most nights, I was probably spending more than I earned. That was definitely, I'd do a 4 or 5 hour shift, earn 60, 70 pounds, come home and spend 100 on gambling. So it really wasn't sustainable. At this point where I started to, I was thinking more and more that I think I might be addicted to this. It's not doing me any good. I never have any money. I don't feel very good about myself. I kind of sat down with myself and thought, what do I do? And the decision that I came to wasn't the right one, but the decision I came to was, well, actually, look, I'm at university. The culture at university, especially in England, I don't know what it's like for you guys, but for us, it's very much like, yes, you go there to study, of course, but we have a saying that is work hard, play hard, right? So if you're at university all day, working hard, when you finish, a lot of people, there's a culture of going out, drinking far too much, sometimes gambling too much, and other things as well, drugs and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of thought to myself, like, yes, I'm doing something that isn't that great for me right now. It's costing me money and it's not making me feel great, but I'm in this kind of culture of people that are all doing these kind of risky things. And I guess I kind of thought to myself, well, look, I'm in my last year now. So once I finish uni, I'm sure that I'll move on from university life. I'll grow up a little bit maybe, and I'll just go into my job or whatever I'm going to do and leave all this kind of world behind. So I thought that, I'd just be able to just stop and leave. In my third year, so towards the end of my third year, obviously I graduated. I did get my degree, so I was just kind of lucky in that sense. The gambling didn't stop me still getting my education. But I left university and I actually became a professional actor. It's something I'd studied for many years at uni. I was signed by an agent in London. And yeah, I went into the world of professional acting. And it was great, really, like in the sense that I'd worked really hard to achieve something and I'd achieved it. You know, I was touring shows around the UK, and I was a theatre actor, so I did a lot of touring shows and stuff like that. But what quickly happened was I was spending a lot of my life away from home. Touring around the country is not, it sounds fun, but it's really not. It's a lot of traveling, it's a lot of boredom, it's a lot of hotel rooms. The performing, the actual job was great, but I only do that for about 2 hours of the 24 hours in the day. So I started to get quite bored. I also was earning very, very good money. So I was earning quite a lot of money, more money than a lot of people my age. So I found myself sat in hotel rooms, bored, with lots of money in my bank account. And naturally, I put that into gambling. I started gambling again as a way, for different reasons, I guess, but one reason was to escape that boredom, to sort of leave the reality of my life behind for a few hours and just be ingrained in whatever I was doing, whatever I was gambling on. So now I'm in a position where I'm pretty sure that I'm addicted to gambling, and I've got a lot of money to spend, right? So over the next 2 to 3 years, I really built on that addiction, if you like. At uni, I was gambling for 3 or 4 hours a night. I got to the point 2 years later where I was spending 16, 17 hours a day gambling. And I mean, like, I would go to work, I'd do whatever I was doing at work for the few hours that I was working for. I'd come home and I would gamble all evening, and sometimes I'd gamble all through the night. And it became difficult in a lot of ways. Obviously, financially, it was difficult. I was spending lots of money. To give you an idea, towards the end, I was gambling sometimes £5,000 a day. Now, I wasn't losing £5,000 a day. I couldn't afford to do that. But I was putting in £5,000, gambling with it, maybe taking some out, maybe winning some occasionally. And then the next day, I was doing exactly the same thing again. Sometimes I'd take heavy losses. Sometimes I'd win a bit. But overall, I was always losing money. The whole thing kind of came to a head when I found myself without work. So to give you an example of a timeline, I left uni. I worked as a professional actor. I went from one job straight into another job, straight into a third job. And I did that for about 2 years. At the end of that 2 years, it was December, January time. There was just no work around. And I was, I had a couple of months we call it being a resting actor, but essentially you don't have any work. So January and February of 2016, I went back home and I sat at home, not really having much of a purpose. Didn't have to get up for work, didn't have to do anything really. Again, that boredom set in, and I started to gamble more and more. I probably had a period of about 3 weeks where my day would be, I'd get up in the morning. My parents, who I lived with at the time, would go to work. I would gamble all day until they got home from work. I'd stop for about 2 hours because I'd go downstairs, I'd have dinner with them, pretend everything was absolutely fine. I'd go upstairs to bed and I'd gamble all through the night. And I really remember times where I would start gambling, go all the way through the night, and then I would, on my laptop at sort of 6 o'clock in the morning, when I heard my mum and my dad get up, I'd close the laptop, I'd slide it under the bed, and I'd pretend to be asleep. And then I'd wait for them to go, and then the gambling would start again, and it would carry on all day. So we're talking really, like I say, like 16, 17 hours of pure ingrained in gambling. One night, the 26th of February, 2016, I was gambling through the night like I had done previously all the time. And I had a really heavy loss, much heavier loss than I'd ever had previously. I basically lost everything that was in my savings, which was quite a large amount of money. I'd always been close to losing like all of my money, but I'd never quite got there. I'd always saved it, or I'd always managed to sort of win a bit back, and then that sort of led me through to the next day. But this time was the first time that I'd lost all of it. And I panicked, to be honest with you. I realized in that moment that what am I going to do for money? What am I going to do for, I need money to live. What am I going to do? So I took out the biggest overdraft that I could take out of my bank account. And I thought to myself, irrationally, I thought to myself, I'm going to have to try and win it back. So I took out a huge overdraft and I gambled all of that. And eventually I lost all of that as well. So I'm at the point now, this is about 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm at the point now where it's 3 in the morning. I know I've got a gambling addiction. I'm very, very aware of that now. I don't know what to do about it. I feel like I'll never, ever get to a point where I'm not gambling. And in the moment right now, I've got absolutely no money. And I'm also now in a bit of debt. And I think the wave of emotion that flies over you in that moment is incredibly difficult to describe. I think I laid there and I contemplated, what is my life going to become? I can't stop gambling. That was the main thought. I cannot stop. I almost want to, but I can't stop. And I don't know how to. And I don't feel like it's achievable to. I also then started to really started to think about the future. When this happened, I was 22, nearly 23 years old. I was single. I didn't have a girlfriend or wife or anything like that. But I knew I always wanted that. I always wanted to find someone, get married, have children, have that kind of life that we all sort of want. So I really sat there and thought, if I marry someone and maybe have a child and I'm still addicted to gambling, that is going to not only ruin my life, because it's already doing that, it's already ruining my life, but it's going to ruin potentially 2 others. And I felt so guilty when I thought about that. I felt so guilty that I would potentially ruin another life or another 2 lives because of an addiction that I had. In that moment, I thought, I've got to stop this from happening. And unfortunately, my mind didn't go to get some help. It went the other way. So the next morning, I got up. My parents were there. I pretended I put on the act that everything was okay. They went out shopping about 9 o'clock. I sat in my house quite quietly for about an hour. And then I got into my car. I drove to my local town centre. And I went to the top of a 6-story car park, about 100 foot. And I jumped off it. And I made a very, very serious attempt on my life. The next thing I remember was waking up in hospital 3 weeks later. I'd been in a coma for 3 weeks. I then learned that actually I'd been found by a member of the public who'd called an ambulance. I was airlifted, so I was taken in by helicopter to a hospital in London, which is about an hour and a half from where I live now. And yeah, I was put into a coma. I was unable to move for quite some time. When I came round, I learned that my lungs had collapsed. I'd broken all of my ribs. I'd crushed my pelvis, broke 3 vertebrae at the bottom of my back. I broke every bone in my right and left foot. I broke my wrist. And I damaged nerves in my head. They put me into that coma because they said if they hadn't have put me into it within 24 hours, I would have died from the pain. I also learned quite recently, actually, that when my ribs broke, it punctured my lungs, but it also caused quite a lot of internal bleeding. I was given plasma at the side of the road, which is essentially a liquid that helps your blood thicken, because I was losing so much blood. Had I not been given that at the time that I was given it, and the blood transfusion that then followed, I probably wouldn't be here today. It was very lucky, I guess, if you want to call it that, that the people that were there to look after me were there. If they hadn't have been there, I wouldn't, like I say, I wouldn't be here today. Over the next 3 or 4 weeks, I came through recovery of the coma, because it takes quite a while to actually you get a lot of drugs pumped into you. It took a long time to sort of wake up from that. I then spent the next 4 months in hospital, pretty much unable to move. I was told at one point they were unsure if I would ever walk again. Although what did happen was, my recovery went quite well. And then I was able to go to a physio hospital for a month to relearn how to walk. And when I say relearn how to walk, obviously I hadn't forgotten how to walk. But what we mean by that is I've been laying in a bed for 4 months. I've got no calf muscle. I've got no quad muscle. I've got pretty much no muscle mass in my whole body. Had to build all that back up. And eventually over time, I learned to walk again. And, physically made not a full recovery, but made a good recovery. To give you an example of, to give you an idea of how long that took, I made my suicide attempt on the 27th of February. I didn't start walking again until late September. So I was in hospital for that, pretty much that whole year. And then, recovery kind of began. I also obviously went through a lot of mental recovery because I still had an addiction to deal with, which I did through various means of talking therapies. So the reason I think that story is quite important to tell, and I do try to tell it quite publicly, in a number of ways, is because we all know that gambling harm happens, right? We all know that it's a thing, and I appreciate that, you're not going to be able to save everyone all the time. But what I think is really important things to highlight is, one, that story happened in a 5 to 6 year span. I went from being someone that bought a couple of scratch cards to someone that spent £5,000 a day and then wanted to end his own life in 5.5 years. So I really think, look, I know 5.5 years can be is a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really not. All right. I want this story to highlight that just because someone is okay one day doesn't mean that they're not on a path to go somewhere be harmful another day. Okay. And the other thing I like to highlight with this story as well is that, it's not great. It didn't end, it ended in a suicide attempt, which obviously isn't good. But this is happening so often. In the UK alone, this happens every single day. We have at least one gambling, on average, at least one gambling-related suicide every single day in this country. I can't tell you I know the stats for other countries, but I'm sure that they're probably quite similar. Okay? We have to be really aware that the work that we do around responsible gambling, the culture that we create amongst people and customers to actually think about, whilst you are fine today, that's great, and we hope you stay like that, but we need to be encouraging them to put things like tools in place. We need to be encouraging them to think about their spend, to really weigh up their options and say, am I happy with what I'm doing? Am I doing this for entertainment? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, that's where things can start to spiral out of control. And that's exactly what happened to me. The start of my story, when I first started gambling, or when I went to university and we was having a few drinks watching the football, that was fun. I enjoyed that. I can look back at that time and go, that was enjoyable gambling. But somewhere in the middle, something happened and it stopped being enjoyable. And by the time it stopped being enjoyable, I was addicted. Okay. Yes, there's personal responsibility. I absolutely am personally responsible for what happened to me. But also, we have to see that there are other things that could have happened at the time that may not have led to what did, the ending that we've spoken about. So, I just think that's a really important point to pull out of this. As I said, I've got a couple more slides to go through. I'm sure there might be some questions about it. I can see the chat, actually. I'll have a look at that in a second. But what I want this session to be is a chance for you guys to ask questions. Why did that happen? What were you thinking when you were doing this? You know, what could have helped? Because I believe there's such a good amount of learning to come from it. Okay. So we talked a little bit about, you know, fostering that responsible culture. Okay. This slide here really talks about why it's important for operators and why it's beneficial for operators to do that. Okay. I appreciate that some people may think, well, actually, if we're putting tools in place, we may be losing money. But overall, we have to be thinking about what benefit it is for society. Okay. You're also creating, when you have a responsible gambler, you're creating a sustainable customer base. The way to think about it is like this, right? If I had stayed in that fun social gambling stage, right, spending a bit of money each weekend, I probably, because I enjoyed it, would have done that for the rest of my life. So you've got that regular income, you've got that regular customer for 50, 60, 70 years, okay? But what actually happened is I got heavily addicted and I spent a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but I believe the money I spent in a big chunk was probably less than I would have spent over the course of my life. And actually what's happened now is I spent that chunk of money, yeah, so operators got that money, whatever, but I've taken a vow to never gamble again. So what you've lost, essentially, not just in me, but in lots of gamblers, is a sustainable customer. So it's really important to think about the long term and not, you know, money coming in big chunks. Thinking about that long customer journey. Obviously, if you are a responsible operator, look, responsible gambling has moved so much since my experience, okay? And it's got much better, okay? People actually look for operators that are responsible, okay? They look for operators that are going to keep them safe. So the UK Gambling Commission in 2021, they said that the reputation of a gambling company being fair and trustworthy was the reason that people signed up to them. It wasn't about odds or bonuses. It was about people thinking this operator is reputable. They've shown in the past that they look after their customers, and I want to spend my money with them. Okay. It also gives a really positive image of the gambling industry. If more people experience what I experience, the image of the gambling industry is going to drop. Okay. People are going to start thinking that it's dodgy and to stay away from it. Okay. And you'll also attract better staff. If you are that company that is safe, responsible, that, you know, people want to go to work and feel that they've done some good in the world. I truly believe that. Truly believe that nobody goes to work and goes, right, I'm going to ruin someone's life today. Okay. So if people see you as that operator, it will attract people, better staff, and people that want to come and work and do that good job. So I've talked a little bit about GamCare. I just want to talk to you a little bit about what we do. Okay. So one of the things that we can offer to operators, and that we do and have done for many years, is safer gambling training. Okay. So we can look at it in a number of ways. We have a half-day session, a one-day session, a two-day session, or a one-day suicide prevention session. Okay. And it's really up to you which one you want to take. But what this does is it really shines a light on what does gambling harm look like? How do we identify it? And then crucially, what do we do once we've identified it? Okay. How do we help that customer? What might be going through their mind? How do we approach them in a way that helps them understand that we are here to support them? Okay. So yeah, we have these training options. There is a QR code in the corner of the screen. Feel free to scan that. It comes up a couple of times. It'll take you to our website, and you can explore this further if it's something you're thinking about. The other thing that we do also have is the Safer Gambling Standard. Okay. So this is an independent quality standard which benchmarks your business against the industry's best practice. All right. So we know what best practice looks like. Okay. And we can come in and look at the way that you do things and then offer recommendations for improvement. Once those improvements have been made, you're giving you are given an SGS mark, so a Safer Gambling Standard mark. Okay, and that's an accreditation from us to say that we have checked your processes, and at the time of us checking those processes, you are up to the highest industry standard that there is. Okay, So it's expert help and advice from our assessors, and that assessment process can takes a little bit of time, but we offer that one-to-one support. There's also there are criteria for the assessment which covers the culture of your staff, the customers that you work with, and how safe and well treated they are, colleagues as well. How are colleagues well trained in this, and then collaboration. Are you collaborating with not just us, but organizations that can help you with your safer gambling needs? Okay, because we know stuff that other organizations don't know, and other organizations know stuff that we don't know. Okay, so we like to collaborate as much as possible to gain that broader understanding of the safer gambling world and how we can improve it ultimately for people. Okay, so yeah, if you're interested in any of those things, I'm more than happy. I mean, if it's training, I would suggest that you speak to Jenna, and her email address is on the screen. If it's the safer gambling standard, Frank is in charge of that at GamCare. I'd suggest that you go to him as well. And then the lived experience stuff, that's me, and that's my email address there. There is a QR code that you could scan as well. I think what we'll do is we'll go to some questions in a second, but I'm going to stop sharing now. And I guess to end the presentation, I guess I just want to say that we're in a space in gambling where we know lots of people enjoy it, and we want to optimize that experience for people. We want them to have fun, and we want, as an organization, obviously you want to make money. I get that, I understand that. On the flip side of it, there are people experiencing harm. And the more, even if it's a small percentage, the more we can help those people, the more we can start to understand what they're going through and understand how our processes and our signposting might affect them and make their life and their recovery better. I personally think that's the right way to be going. Okay. And I also think that the industry will benefit from that as well. So that's everything from me, guys. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you taking the time to come to the webinar. And I'm more than happy to take questions. I'll have a look at the chat now. Anyone that wants to unmute and ask questions, you feel free to. But I can see at the start here. So thank you for sharing your story. It was very powerful. I want to ask you, at what age is it best to start educating young people about the responsible culture? This is a great question. I started gambling when I was 15 because I had no education of gambling harm. At my school and many schools in the UK, we talked about sexual health. We talked about alcohol abuse. We talked about drug abuse. Those were things that just happened. Okay, we'd have lessons. We would call them personal health, right? But we never talked about gambling. That is now changed, and that is now in the curriculum in the UK. We do talk about gambling in those sessions now, which is great. We see the age to start doing that as 11. Okay, that's just our, from our work, we believe that someone, and that for us in England, 11 is when you start secondary school. Okay, so that is when that's the last school that you'll go to before you move on to college or university. So we do all of the years from we call it year 7 up to year 11. Okay. Having said that, for me, it's not about going into schools and being like, gambling's terrible, don't do it, you'll experience harm. I certainly don't say, oh, look at me, like, don't do what I did. I think it's really important to help young people understand what gambling is, okay, how it works in terms of probability, all right, because you won't believe the amount of young people that I've spoken to that don't understand probability, okay? We want them to have the facts about what gambling is. We want them to understand that it can be a social fun thing to do. And we also want them to understand that that in some cases, it can become dangerous and it can become harmful to them. In those cases, we also want them to know where they can go to get help. So for us, we start doing that from 11 years old. And we go into schools and we talk very candidly about the things I've just mentioned. So hopefully that answers your question. Thanks for that, Danny. So we've got one from Daniel. Can you please share the official stats of the suicides based on gambling and the source backing that data up? Yeah, I can. If you shoot your email in the chat for me, I can send you some papers or some, where we've got those stats from. That's not a problem at all. Got another question here. Can you tell us, in your opinion, how can we use new technologies and innovations to promote responsible gambling? Yeah, I mean, look, I can't pretend I'm an expert on these things. I don't know all the new technology that's out there, but I don't think the technology and the way that you do it is massively important. I think the messages that you give when you do it are important. Okay, so I think it's really important to understand that, you know, having a safer gambling message should really, for me, feel really honest. Okay, it should sort of say, look, this is the harm that gambling can cause. We don't want you to go there, and we believe that having these things in place will stop that from happening. So, for instance, looking back at my story, in my story, I got to a point where actually a limit being set on my account, even if it was mandatory, a limit being set on my account would have stopped some of the financial harm that happened to me. Maybe a time limit would have helped as well. Okay, because I was spending so many hours gambling. Maybe a time limit would have given me that, someone forcing me to have that break would have helped me clear my mind, because when you're in that gambling moment, when you're in that moment, you're gambling, you have been for 3 or 4 hours, you lack clarity, right? You lack a lot of brain clarity. Taking a break can actually bring that clarity back. So in answer to your question, I would say that it's important the messages that you give, that they're honest, and that the reason behind them is we want to keep you safe. In terms of technologies to do that, I think limit setting is a great thing. I think having specific times where someone can and can't gamble is helpful. And I think we should be promoting that across all channels. So social media, TV, radio advertising. I know it happens quite a bit now in the UK. I think that's a good thing. Keep drumming in that message that using tools is normal. We need to normalize the use of safer gambling tools. When I was gambling, right, if someone had said to me, have you thought about putting a limit in place? I may not have said it out loud, but my thought process would have been no, because that means I'm telling people that I'm an addict. That's me telling people I can't keep control. So I always thought of tools as something that addicts used. It was not for me. But we need to change that culture. We need to change that messaging. And we need to think about, actually, when you get into a car, most people will put their seatbelt on, right? That's not you saying, I'm going to crash. That's you saying, there's a potential that I could crash. So it's good to put the safety measure in place. And I think we should look at gambling in exactly the same way. Okay. I'm not saying by putting a limit in place that you're gonna, you're definitely going to experience gambling harm, but you could. So why not have that safety net? I think that's really important. Cool. Thank you for that question. Just moving on. I can see we've got quite a lot, and I'm going to try and get through them all. So what do you think is essential for empowering customers to play responsibly? What tools to use to convince society and the companies in the industry that this is integral to building a sustainable gaming industry? I think we've just slightly touched on that, so I won't bang on about it again. But yeah, I think empowering customers is a really, really important thing. It's about, I think any reasonable person will understand, if you rang someone up and said, we're going to put a limit on your account, your limit's £500 a day, buy, and put the phone down, you'd probably get a customer like, why? Why are they treating me like this? Why are they treating me like a child? Why do they think I can't control myself? That's not helpful, okay? But if you are able to explain the process of that, well, we're going to put this limit on your account because actually what we've seen in the past is we've seen some really good social gambling that quite clearly you've told us you enjoy, but we've also seen some times where you've potentially spent a little bit more money than you may have wanted to, or you've spent more time than you usually do. And we just want to put your safety first, okay? So we're going to test out this this limit. It may or may not work for you, and we're happy to have that conversation. It's about getting to know your customers, okay? And I know you can't get to know everyone. There's thousands of customers that you'll be working with, but where you can have a relationship and you can have that ongoing communication, I think that empowers people to think, do you know what? Actually, it's a good thing to have this in place. Even if I don't need it, or even if sometimes it makes me a little bit like annoyed, I know that it's there for the right reasons. How can gaming operators promote responsible gambling Should they invest more in this field? I mean, I'm always going to advocate for more investment in safer gambling, responsible gambling. Yeah, I'm always going to say that that's the one to be putting money into, because I think safety for me should be paramount for customers. At the end of the day, we have a product that can be addictive, and we should be aware of that. I think, you know, I don't know the ways that you currently do promote it, so I can't really give my opinion on that as such. But I think if you're looking at saturation of adverts, for instance, if you're watching your telly, you're watching your TV and maybe a football match, and you're seeing 8 adverts for, you know, sign up for this bonus and whatever else on your screen in a 1 hour period, I think you should be matching that with gambling, safer gambling, responsible gambling adverts. So for every come and play with us, you've also got here's some tools to help you stay safe. I think there should be an even split there. Thanks for your email address, Daniel. I'll copy that and get back to you. How can we ensure that support and treatment services are accessible to everyone who needs them? I think it's a really nice question. I guess I don't know that, you know, for our, I can only speak about our structure. That's where I'm an expert, is the UK structure. I'm not 100% sure about yours. I would encourage any country to have a national line, which I think you guys do have, but a national helpline that can be utilized by people having issues. But I would also think about routes into treatment. When we look at treatment, we look at where are the barriers? What is stopping people coming to us? Now, we know some people don't want to pick up the phone and talk to us. They might want to text us. They might want to talk to us over a live chat. They might even, you can get in contact with GamCare through WhatsApp. Okay. We understand that people don't want to speak on the phone all the time. So we have a number of different ways that they can contact us. So I think thinking about accessibility to treatment is really important. I also would advocate for an eye on those hard to reach areas. Okay. We find it difficult to engage with people who are from low income areas. We find it difficult to engage with people who are from the African community or from the Muslim community, because their culture is very different. Okay. For instance, in Islam, gambling is classed as haram, right? So it's essentially, you are not allowed to do this as part of your religion. So if someone is doing it, not only are they admitting that they've got a problem and need help, they're admitting that they've done something against their own religion, which is a very, very difficult thing. So, you know, making sure that we can engage with those groups. Okay. The more you engage with customers about responsible gambling, the more you give them the messages that we are here to offer you a fun experience, but also to ensure that you stay safe. The more you do that, the more they will trust you. The more they trust you, the more they will engage. Okay. And I truly believe that getting to know your customers is really, really important. Cool. We've got quite a few questions coming in, so I'm going to try and round through them. How can providers of content be more active on the field of responsible gambling when collaborating with operators? I'm going to assume by providers of content you mean like people that make games. I'm going to be honest, I can't pretend I know a huge amount about that, so I don't want to give you too much of an answer. But look, responsible gambling and responsible gaming should be at the forefront of everyone's mind that works in this field. If you are a game maker, okay, yes, I appreciate that you have, you know, you make games in certain ways, I'm sure, to make them fun and enjoyable, but actually we need to be looking at research. Okay. There's plenty of research out there that you can look at, that we have laws in our country around what games are allowed to include and how long between spinning a slot machine you're allowed to have, because it's just about giving people that time to think, is this what I want to do? Not constantly keep gambling, and at the end of it realize, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That's probably the best answer I can give you to that question. Apologies, it's not as full as I'd like it to be. a lot of times the responsible gaming messages reach the public, but they do not reach the consumers. What needs to be done to change that? Well, I think targeted messaging is one. You know, again, without specifically knowing your structure, I can't really comment. But what I would say is, if you are an operator that is sending emails to your customer base saying, here's a new offer, why couldn't you do the same targeted advertising around safer gambling? Here's a new offer of a new safer gambling tool that we're putting in place. You know, you might just want to send a message out saying, you know, did you know that gambling can be addictive? Here's the signs of what it looks like. Some people don't, believe it or not, some people still don't understand that gambling is addictive. Some people, I certainly was one of these people, I didn't know what gambling addiction looked like. So I couldn't notice the signs in myself. I couldn't notice the fact that I'd withdrawn from my family, that I was spending more money than I should do, that it was making me feel not great. They were signs that I was addicted to gambling, but I couldn't always recognize that. And I know I said before that, like, yeah, I knew I was a bit addicted, but I didn't recognize that those other things that were going on in my life were a contribution of that addiction. Okay, so I think making people aware of what it looks like, where to get help. Okay, I think, you know, one of the questions before, how do we make treatment and support more accessible? Tell people about it. You know, make people really aware that this is what gambling harm looks like. If you think you're going through this, here's some options of what you've got, what you can do next. Okay, I think it's really important that targeted messaging goes out to the customers and the people that need it most. Okay, you know, you might be able to see actually you've got some people playing with you that are showing signs of risky behavior. I would be really, really putting some safer gambling messaging together and targeting those people. Last question that's come in: how could workers from the land-based casinos provide assistance to customers in need? Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I've talked a lot about online because that was my experience. Yes, I was in bookmakers at the early part of my experience, but a lot of my harm happened online. But I will sympathize, because land-based is hard, because online you've got data, you can review that data and see what a customer's been doing. You know, and I know you have a bit of that in land-based environments, but essentially that's where relationships with customers is so important. You know, everyone that walks into your casino, you know, all right, I know you're going to get a few people that come in once and never come back. Fine. All right. Not as easy, but you know, when you've got your regular customers, you need to be having as many conversations with them as possible. Not all about safer gambling. Get to know them, get to know who they are, understand when they come in and they have a real enjoyable time, what's their personality like? You know, how much do they drink? What makes them laugh? What keeps them happy? Because actually, when that gambling, if that gambling turns to something that becomes harmful, you're likely to see a change in all of that. You're likely to see that they're not as happy. You're likely to see that maybe they drink a little bit more. Okay, you're likely to see that their personality will change. My personality hugely changed when I went through this issue. I didn't want to talk to people. I'm a very social person usually, but I didn't want to talk to people. I was angry all the time. I'd go out and I'd get into fights because I was so angry. Like, it wasn't the person I was fighting I was angry with, it was my own issues. It's all these kind of things, you know. If you're seeing players that are constantly frustrated, question why. It might not be anything to do with gambling, but question it. I think that's such an important thing to think about, is you might be wrong. It might not be gambling harm, but if you ask the question, you'll find the answer. Okay. If you don't ask the question, you limit yourself from finding that answer. I think that's so important. Okay. So, yeah, really get to know your customers, you know, watch intently as to what they're doing, understand any changes in mood. Identify any changes in mood, and never be afraid to ask, look, you seem a little bit down today. Is everything okay? You know, I've seen that, you know, I've been watching you. I've seen that you've had a bit of a loss today. Obviously, that's not great. How do you feel about it? Still enjoying yourself? All those kind of open questions are really, really helpful to help people question themselves. Actually, I haven't really thought about it, but yeah, gambling has made me feel really rubbish the last few weeks, actually. Maybe I need a break. Maybe I just need to put something in place to help that. So yeah, those are the things I do in a land-based environment, but I do sympathize. I know it's difficult in those environments as well. I think, guys, we're about 3 minutes from the end anyway. I'm pretty sure that is all questions answered. So I will wrap it up there and just finish by sort of saying thank you for coming, thank you for listening to my story and you know, my kind of insights into this harm. You know, some of the stuff I've told you today is just my opinion. I have to be very clear about that. But you know, a lot of the stuff around how to engage with customers, that comes from our training. Okay, that is insights from our training. So it just gives you a bit of a taster of what that training is like, and how beneficial it could be to you as well. I want to be very clear before we leave that I am not someone that thinks gambling should be banned just because I've had a bad experience with it. I'm not someone that thinks that we should, you know, take away gambling, or, you know, we should make it really, really hard for operators. I just don't think that's the right way to go. But I am someone that advocates for ensuring that we put customers first and safety first. And I know that this is happening around the world, and it's really great for me to see that. Okay. So yeah, I hope that this session hasn't come across as a bashing of the industry at all. It's not that. I work with the industry in the role that I have at GamCare. So, you know, I'm very much up for that collaboration. I think we all, us as a charity, operators, game makers, associations, we all have a part to play in this journey. And if we all play that part, I believe that we can make the world a better place in terms of gambling harm. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. So thank you so much for your time. And yeah, appreciate it, and have a great day.